Hi, Sam. It's nice to see you. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview today.
Oh, I'm happy. It's great to see you too.
Let's start with having you tell our viewers a little bit about your background and your path to becoming an artist.
Yeah, for like simple educational background, I started at an arts high school, Tacoma School of the Arts, and then I went to the University of Washington and I got my BFA in drawing and painting, and then I got my master's, which is where I met Jenny Castle, extraordinaire, and I got my master's in fine arts 2D, and kind of how I started and the route to becoming a professional artist was really um, off off track. I didn't know a single artist growing up. There's not one in my family. I had very few models to go for. I didn't really see anyone who was working in that vein until I got to high school. And even then, coming from like a family of people who work for a living and go to college for a specific job and kind of worker bee mentality, the conception of an artist as like a viable path was really difficult to wrap my head around. So once I got to college, I really was seeking out these like models, people who I could find who could show me a route. And the way I kind of did it was like the most practical, clear cut, applying to like certain schools and making lists and just trying to do everything I could possibly do to make it work. And then I went to graduate school. I worked incredibly hard. I was surrounded by all these amazing people who had different backgrounds and different experiences, different processes, and I learned from them and worked and read more than I've ever read. And then I was really lucky. I was featured in some articles. I got connected with the gallery, and now I show with them every 2 years. And then throughout the year, I'll show a couple pieces, but I have solo shows every 2 years. And miracle meets luck meets really, really hard work. Now I'm a professional artist.
Well, that's a great story and a wonderful path that you followed. Um, Having a daily studio practice requires dedication, and daily rituals can be tedious. I think we're all feeling the effects of that these days, being stuck at home. How do you find inspiration and develop new ideas?
I think part of it is being motivated, like finding things that motivate you and inspire you at the time, like whether it's books or movies or walks outside. For me, it's about when I am motivated and inspired, other times, like making those notes and having all those references so that when I'm at a time where I'm lower, I can go back to that. So I always have sketchbooks and I have these like gridded out systems that it's like the next like 24 paintings that I could do. I have like little reference images and notes about what I was thinking. If I go to a reference, we saw um, an artist talk by Barbara Bosworth, and I took like 4 pages of notes of things about her and her practice that were so interesting, but also things that just like connected in your head, like, oh, like what if I could feel the density of the air in a painting? How would that work? And then taking those notes and saving them all, and pictures from walks and hikes, and finding all of that inspiration. And then when you're cooped up in your house for months at a time, finding those again and seeing like, hey, what was I thinking here? And what's the most interesting to me right now? And that's how I stay motivated. It's not like a day to day. It's a kind of looking at it as like a whole year. How can you set yourself up well to move forward?
To follow up with that, a lot of your work focuses on the natural environment, and you were talking about walks and hikes. Talk about how life experience directly affects the type of work that you really enjoy making.
Oh yeah, it's everything. When I went to graduate school, the work had gone into a phase that was much more monochromatic and abstracted. And then moving across the country away from the wilderness of Western Washington, which I had never done, I'd never been apart from it for a long period of time. I didn't, landscape had been in the work, but it wasn't the work. But once I was away from it, I felt it in like every part of who I was. I like in my body, in what I talked about, what I thought about. I just missed it, and the work transitioned more. It still has the abstractness, it still has the really subtle color nuance small shifts become what's interesting, those quiet moments. It still has all that DNA in it, but the landscape was at that point and is still today what the work is for me. It's inhabitable. It's a shelter. It's where I want to be. It's where I want other people to feel like they can enter into. And so when I came back home and I was reunited with it, now it's like a celebration. And I can see it in the work. I can see like the work where you're missing it, the absence of it, and how it feels different than the work that's celebratory and or the work like on a dreary, really dark winter, how it is like softer, like a blanket. And so I like to try to fill the work not just with like how I was feeling, what I was missing, but also like what did the earth feel like? Like when you stepped into it, did your feet sink into it? Was it dry? Was it crumbly? Did the air smell a certain way? And it's hard to like look at a painting and have someone else know what I was feeling and like get those in. But I try as I work on it to really remember those, to have the full experience, to like if I'm working from an image, a photograph, or a sketch, like if I'm working on a tree, like what was the back of the tree? Think about the entire object of it and like a full experience. Aldo Leopold in the Sam County Almanac has this quote about living away from nature, the danger of it. Like you remember your heat as something that comes from like a furnace versus like what if like versus a fire, or like growing your food versus the grocery store, and like how do these experiences change and shift in your perspective and relationship to them. And I like to bring some of that to the paintings. It's really essential for me in the process of making to have all that.
So you mentioned Barbara Bosworth's lecture. You mentioned reading almanacs. As artists, we make breakthroughs oftentimes when we experience art of others. So can you talk a little bit more about artists or authors, films or music that have recently inspired your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Agnes Martin is like the queen of my heart. I just love her work so much. And I've talked to other artists about it who just don't get it. And they're like, I feel like it's a painting with lines. But to me, it's something else when you stand in front of one, having that opportunity to like feel it and see it, and how she relates the work to her experience, and you can just feel it, or I can. And I love that these small shifts, these little things are so real in how they transfer to a larger experience. And then Annie Albers, her weavings make me want to draw, and her drawings make me want to weave. I don't know why it shifts in my head, but it does. And I have been lucky enough to see some of her work in person too, and it's so beautifully constructed. And the attention, the nuance and detail, and it just all feels so intentional. Every mark, I can like the gesture of it is so right, and I love her work. And then another Anne Westman, I was lucky enough to work with her in Boston, and she's someone who I had seen her work. My first show in Boston, I saw it and I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. I loved the use of the natural world in her work, but in a not expected way. And her work is really subtle and beautiful, and there's repetition to it and some conversation with the grid. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is, and then I saw in their bio that they worked at Mass Art, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I can see it like a lecture. And then my last year, I reached out to them, and I know we're not in the same department, and they generously agreed to be one of my advisors. So I got to see their work, admire their work, and then talk to them on a personal level. And being able to have that experience really was wonderful. That's 3 artists. And then as far as books, Salt by Nayyirah Waheed is one of my favorite poetry books right now. I'm on my 3rd read, but every time it's so good, and you can open the book to any page on any day and it will like give you something. I could not recommend it higher to any artist, but also just for me, it's really important. And then Catherine de Zegher, she edits a lot of books, and she's a curator and does all these amazing things, but her book 3 Times Abstraction is one of the best art books I've ever read. So those are some of my big things right now. And I think for movies, it's hit and miss. Like I'll love a really amazing movie, I'll see Moonrise Kingdom, and I'll think about the color palette and the music and the pace of it, and the world building, and how can I bring the world building to my own work, because that's something that I think is really integral. When you stand in front of one of my large paintings, I want the viewer to enter into it, to have this experience where they're no longer in a gallery or space, but they're having this experience with the work and go in somewhere, whether it's some place from their memory or that the painting has brought to them, in the way that Moonrise Kingdom is this complete world that's like so believable. You understand it. The color palette is perfect, and the way it's paced, the speed of it. If I can make a gallery show the pace of that kind of movie, so I have an experience like that with something that is objectively, to me, wonderful, high quality. But then I'll also watch like a Hallmark movie with my mom at Christmas, and then there'll be this scene with this song and the way the trees look in the light, and something that someone might consider less artistically complicated, I still find something that can really inspire my own work. And those are some of the things that are hitting me right now.
That's all wonderful. Yeah, I mean, everything that we view and experience can influence as artists, and it's wonderful to hear that you're so open to all of those experiences. We have to wrap up soon, but before we go, do you have any advice for young artists and makers?
Yeah, I think being who I was and coming from the background I came from, I thought I had to be perfect. Like being an artist was such a long shot that I had to say yes to every opportunity. I had to jump over every possible hurdle and do everything perfectly. And every time that I was told you can't do this was more support for this thought process I had, that you had to be perfect. And the longer I do it, the more it's not a sprint. It's the long game. That's part of what being an artist is so wonderful, is you get to do this wonderful thing for your whole life. And if you make a mistake, that's okay. You just do better. You just learn and you do better the next time, and you put the time in, and you can always practice and improve because it's something that you love so much. Like, what a miracle is it that, like, I'm lucky. I'm 29 now, but when I was 18, I was like, I can't breathe without I can't be myself without doing this. And so now I've spent more than 10 years driving towards that and learning and making mistakes and then growing forward. But I think one of the big lessons is to not be so hard on yourself. Like, it's important, but if you make a mistake, just learn from it and then move on to the next thing. And if you don't get an opportunity, you can always get better. That's the beautiful thing, is you're going to spend however long improving yourself and improving the practice. And you weren't ready for this opportunity this year, we'll apply next year. And the time is going to happen. And then also find your teachers, because the route to being an artist is not a straight line. And so find people who have done it and ask them for tips. And that's how I found my route.
Sam, thank you for being so generous and sharing information about your practice and the things that inspire you. Before we go, I want to announce to everyone viewing that Sam is currently preparing for a show at Momentum Gallery in Asheville, North Carolina, and she will be presenting her work at the Forsberg Art Gallery in April of 2021. You can stay current on Sam's work via her Instagram at Sam Bates NW, and you can view her work on Momentum Gallery's website, momentumgallery.com. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for doing this today.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.